Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is one of those games where opinions are going to be all over the place. You ask 5 people and you'll probably get 5 different answers. Some swear its combat is deep and rewarding, while others find it slow and extremely overwhelming. I played it for the first time on the Switch 2 in 2025, and honestly there were a few mechanics that had me like, what am I even supposed to do here? Like, am I underleveled? But after doing a little bit more digging and research, I was able to shed some light on what I was doing wrong, and it turns out that some of these are the most important systems in the game, where the tutorial takes a long time and is kind of long-winded explaining it, or doesn't do a great job explaining it at all. In this video, we're going to cover all of that though and everything I learned, and break down whether Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is still worth playing in 2025. And don't worry, this is going to be completely spoiler free, and if you want to just skip straight to the final verdict, I'll have a TLDR at this timestamp right here. But with that out of the way though, let's start by diving into what turned a lot of players off from Xenoblade Chronicles 2 in the first place. Let's start with the biggest complaint out of all of them, and that's going to be how they handled the blade system by incorporating a gacha. And so essentially you have a ton of common blades like these ones right here, and then you also have a tier of rare. So you pull on the gacha, which has an RNG chance to give you a common blade, which is obviously going to be the highest chance, or you can get a rare blade, which is going to be ones like this, or this, which obviously are going to be stronger, have different powers, and more viability. So that means if there's a specific blade that you want and you get to the late game, there's a chance that you're going to have to grind hours to get that rare blade. And a lot of people find it frustrating, and they want to keep the kind of gacha mechanics and RNG out of the JRPG side of things. Now, I would say the game does give you a good bit of blades as you progress through the story to bypass this, and I don't think the rates are abysmal. If you're looking for a specific blade, they can be abysmal, but if you just are okay with getting any rare and kind of building a team around it, I think it's pretty solid. But I definitely understand this frustration, and even more if you're a completionist trying to collect all of the blades. The next 2 big complaints kind of go hand in hand, and that's going to be that a lot of people felt the tutorials were clunky and there was an extremely slow start to combat. The game introduces a ton of mechanics and kind of builds upon one another and slow walks you to getting the full understanding of combat. So that's going to be spread out across several hours, and some things are going to be buried in menus if you forget and you need to revisit, which often means the best option is that when you get to chapter 3, which is about 7 hours in, and combat fully opens up for you to understand the long-term combat system, your best bet is just going to be hitting a YouTube video and having them explain the different mechanics that are spread out through the course of this 7 hours. I'm going to do my best to hit on it a little bit later when we start discussing combat, but those like 3 things together were the biggest complaints that I saw. The next complaint we can hit pretty quick. The map, 100% ass. It's not good at all. I agree with this complaint. And then the final one that we're going to discuss is going to be the over-sexualization when it comes to character designs. And all of these complaints I looked up after I beat the game, so I wouldn't have any bias in terms of formulating my own opinion. And this was definitely one that I had in my notes. I really don't care that much about it, but I was sitting there and I'm like, wait, Pyra's wearing a translucent skirt with the G-string on. I was just like, bro, what? Like I said, I don't care. But when I was like sitting there and I was peeling back her character design, and I was doing it with all the characters, I was like, huh, that's an interesting choice to go with. And then when I saw the complaints about this, when I beat the game and was researching for this video, I was like, okay, they have a point. And then another one is going to be the design of a female blade like Dahlia, which I didn't unlock. So, you know, I didn't have this take. But upon looking at this character design, I agree, man. There were also some complaints of excessive fan service. And I mean, like, I don't really agree with this. There were some moments where I'm like, yeah, okay, you know, women don't act like this. Stop it. But I don't necessarily agree that like it was abundant to where there was just a ton of fan service that made the game unbearable. Those are the 4 major complaints that I found, but if you keep watching this video, I'm going to address the slow start to combat that's going to change entirely how you play the game, and I'm also going to get into things that can kind of bypass the gacha system to still make this an enjoyable experience. But before we do that, let's start with the quick story overview. In Xenoblade Chronicles 2, people live on the backs of giant creatures called Titans, which float above a massive sea of clouds. These Titans are basically the last bits of land left, so all life depends on them to survive. Alongside humans, there are also going to be blades, which are going to be living weapons that form when someone bonds with their core crystal. And when that happens, the person who bonded with that core crystal, which is going to likely be a human, becomes what is known as a driver. And the blades fight with them in battle that gives them a unique weapon as well as special abilities and powers. You play as Rex, a salvager who dives into the Cloud Sea to collect old tech and treasure, and on one of his jobs, he ends up becoming the driver of a powerful blade named Pyra, who then asks him to take her to a place called Elysium. And Elysium's a legendary paradise that's rumored to be humanity's last hope, and this paradise is a rumor in itself and whether it actually exists or not. Now, the main problem with the game is going to be that the Titans are dying out, and as they weaken, the land on their back disappears, and the whole civilization is going to go with them as that land begins to disappear. And so with no solid ground to move to, and no new Titans being born, humanity is running out of time to find the solution, and all things point to Elysium being the only shot to save what's left of humanity. The story obviously evolves beyond this, but I feel like this is the best explanation to sell the story without any major spoilers. You are technically able to play Xenoblade Chronicles 2 and have a full understanding without playing Xenoblade Chronicles 1, but I really recommend playing 1 first and then 2, and then a must play both of those 2 before going into Xenoblade 3. Now, when it comes to my opinion on the story of Xenoblade Chronicles 2, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't think it was bad, but I really didn't like it much either. I feel like I had such a high bar and expectations from playing Xenoblade Chronicles 1 that I just expected Xenoblade Chronicles 2 to live up to that same hype. So I was a little bit let down, but it wasn't necessarily a bad story. I feel like for me, Xenoblade, I play games for the story. Like, I've disclosed this a ton, and I feel like for me, Xenoblade Chronicles 1's story was way better, but the combat kind of sucked. And I feel like for Xenoblade Chronicles 2, it's the opposite, where the combat is just generational. It's amazing, but the story left a lot to be desired. I mentioned that I did play this on the Switch too, and I also wanted to emphasize that this was pre any upgrade packs, and I thought that visually it looked amazing. I didn't notice any load times. Like, there was nothing where it's like, okay, this is hanging a bit, or I felt like at any point things were being restricted by the Switch 2's hardware. The game worked beautifully without the upgrade pack, and if there is one in the future, I only imagine that it's going to be even better. But I will toss in a quick caveat that that's only docked. If you try and play it in handheld mode right now on the Switch 2 without any upgrade pack, it looks abysmal and it's unplayable. If you haven't already, I really would appreciate it if you considered subscribing to the channel for more JRPG content like this and helping me get this video to 100 likes. But now that you've went ahead and taken care of that, let's get back into the video. Now let's talk about combat, and I feel like the combat in Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is some of my favorite that I've seen in any JRPG I've played. Now let me go ahead and explain the way that the blade system and the driver system works. Nia is going to be our party member, and she's the driver, and she's able to engage with up to 3 different blades. These 3 different blades are going to have different weapons, abilities, and classes attached to them to customize how you want Nia to play as a driver. So although Nia is a healer, that doesn't necessarily mean that I can't equip someone that's a non-healer to her and play her in a different class if I wanted her to be a tank or a DPS. Just because they have that predefined class starting out doesn't mean you have to stick to it, but generally I kept Nia as a healer, so all of the different blades I have engaged to her are going to be healer based, which you can see on those rolls. Now the same thing said for drivers can be said for blades, and this isn't a good example, but let's say for instance Ursula, she has the healer role. Just because she's a healer doesn't mean she's not going to be able to do a lot of DPS and be played as a DPS. So these roles are kind of a guideline and not more of like a defining, this is exactly how they have to be played. Now, each different blade is going to have a weapon associated with it, which you guys can see on that right-hand side right here. And that's going to allow the driver, which in this case is Nia, to use different weapon abilities. And so these are all the weapons that are available to Nia. And each of them are going to have a different sequence of auto attack chains, as well as abilities that you can do in here and effects with those abilities. So when you enter combat, you're going to have different auto attacks. And so this is probably going to be what you experience when you first start out playing, but it does evolve. But this is what you're going to do. Your character is going to do a sequence of auto attacks, and they're going to keep doing this. And then you're going to weave in your skills in between to dish out damage. So this is the extent that people who say that the game plays slow probably think that the combat stops at. but once you get to chapter 3, things start to evolve. So one thing that I learned that really helped out was that on the bottom right, you can see that each attack raises and speeds up the cooldown of the ability to come off of cooldown so we can use it again. What you're actually able to do is cancel these attacks by wiggling your directional button, and it cancels it, so you continuously do your first attack, and that allows you to get all of your skills back significantly quicker. And so you're really never going to do the full auto attack sequence. You're really just going to be moving the movement stick and then canceling that first auto attack and then spamming those abilities once you get them. So this auto attack reset is going to be a very important part to clearing some of the more challenging combat, especially early in the game before you start to invest in your affinity chart, because they're going to make your abilities come off of cooldown faster. And now those that complain that the combat is slow probably also didn't know this portion or invest in the correct infinity chart stats. So there is one that's going to allow you to cancel arts into another. So I can do that art into this art, into this art, and then they're all on cooldown, but I was able to spam them out so much quicker because you dish out additional damage if you do the art after an auto attack. So boom, I can chain it, and then I can also chain that into my special ability to make combat feel much more quicker. But that is something that you're going to have to invest in the infinity chart that you can see right here. Pretty much every driver has this ability in their affinity chart. You just have to know to unlock it, and this should be your main prioritization. Another thing to note is that you can shuffle between all 3 of their blades that you can see on that bottom left corner and use all of their skills and switch through all of them to build up your special. But I think the biggest thing that you need to know is this attack reset, as well as driver combos and blade combos. With driver combos, these are going to be abilities. So you can see on the top left with Nia, I just inflicted break. Now they inflicted topple and then launch, which is going to send it into the air. And then I'm able to do a smash. I'm able to do a smash, which is going to smash him back into the ground. And that's going to conclude the chain of what is deemed a driver combo. After that, you have a blade combo, which I'm able to do my special. And this is the special. And then you can see on the top right, we have different routes that we can go. So if I use a level 2 special, that's a water ability, we're going to go in that route. If I use a level 2 special that's an earth ability, we'll go in the other route. And so I did my level 1 special to start this, and now I have to build up my level 2 special to continue the blade combo. And this is going to be how you dish out big damage. And it's important to also note that it has to be of that element to keep it going. So I just did another water one, putting me at the level 2 water combo. And then I'd have to get a level 3 special that is either water or dark to finish that. Now, those are going to be the main ways for dishing out damage, is hitting those level 3 blade combos and getting those elements right. So this is where a lot of the team building comes into place, and combat can get very more like strategic as to what you do, so that way you can make sure that you have the proper elements in place to hit these blade combos. And then when you do that final level 3 blade combo based on whatever element that is, that's going to put an orb on whatever enemy you're fighting that's going to spin around them, that's going to come into play when we discuss chain attacks a little bit later. Now, where you're able to start dishing out big damage, and what the game wants you to do is begin combining the driver combos with the blade combos to do something that's called a fusion combo. So with the blade combo, as I'm working my way up to doing a level 3, at the level 3 combo, you're going to get a special animation that's going to slow things down, and you're going to dish out maximum damage that's going to conclude that blade combo. Now, if you want to dish out the most amount of damage that you can do, and what the game wants you to do, especially when you're doing boss fights, is to time the level 3 blade combo with the topple driver combo. So if you're able to break your enemy and then topple them, and you're able to do your level 3 blade combo and end it right there, is going to be how you dish out the most damage. And that's going to be how you beat this game, as well as beat some of the more difficult bosses. That's something that the game does explain, but I feel like it really should have highlighted it way more with how important it is. Now, all of these combat elements are going to build on one another, and that final stack is going to be chain attacks. So earlier we discussed that at the end of a level 3 blade combo, you're going to get that orb of the element that you did the level 3 with that's going to spin around your enemy. During the chain attack, you're going to be able to break these orbs, and you're going to get to go down all of your team members and let them do a special, and they're going to be attempting to break those orbs that you put on the enemy. Now, let's say for instance you have a fire orb If you use a water blade at this portion, it's going to be a weakness, so it's going to target that fire orb and deal extra damage. But if you don't use a weakness, it's going to have an RNG chance to hit any of the other orbs that is on the enemy. If you destroy those orbs, you get another wave of your chain attack to continue dishing out more damage. And this is where things start to get very strategical, because you want to get into your team building to make sure that you have weaknesses to target the right orbs and destroy them, so that way you continue out your chain attack. Because if you aren't able to destroy any of these orbs, that's going to be where your chain attack stops. So the strategic also comes into play when you're applying those orbs. As you're doing your level 3 blade combos, you're going to have to start strategizing and thinking, do I have the weakness to cover this? And am I able to kill it in time to keep the chain attack going to deal maximum damage to the boss that I'm fighting? This took me a really long time to pick up. It's several YouTube videos, but once it was explained to me, that's when things just really elevated and made combat in this game just have so much more depth to it, and strategizing, not only when it comes to just fighting the battle, but as early as building your team with the different blades that you have access to make sure that you can dish out maximum damage when you make it to this final stage with the chain attacks. The more that I play the game, the more that I started to feel like a lot of this combat system was really designed to shine and thrive when you get into the New Game Plus or take on some of the end game bosses. I know that was a lot of yapping, but that's pretty much a summary of all the different combat mechanics you need to know, especially if you decide to give the game a try and you want to be effective early on. Now let's talk about some of the unique features with Xenoblade Chronicles 2, and I feel like the game defining one is going to be the gacha system with the blades. Now essentially you're going to be able to farm different crystals, and these are going to allow you to pull on the gacha, and you're going to have a random chance to either get a rare blade, which are the ones that you want, or a common blade. Now I do acknowledge that this system is extremely annoying, but there is actually a pity system, and there's different routes that you can go. So every 100 attempts, you're going to be, I believe it was 100, so don't quote me, but every certain amount of attempts, you're going to be guaranteed a rare blade, and you have a path to go down. So after you get your first rare blade, you can predict what the next pity is going to be for the second and third rare blades that you get from the pity system. I really don't like this, and I get the complaints because I feel like I wanted to play with cool looking blades, and all of those were the rare blades, and I didn't really like the designs of the common blades, and it felt like I didn't really get a chance to play with the cool blades until I unlocked them in the story, because the gacha side really depended on RNG. I feel like that's extremely annoying, and I really wish they would have done something like a selector ticket where it allows you to select at least one of the rare blades, so you can at least build a team around that rare blade and pick one that you kind of resonate with, that you either thought looked cool or you liked the way that it played. Another cool thing with Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is that you're never really gonna have to grind. If you're feeling like you're underleveled, you can just go to an end, and based on where you're at in the story or the things that you've explored, you're gonna gain XP that can be used there, so you can control if you want to be over leveled or if you want to be at the level that the game wants you at as you take on some of the different challenges throughout the story. The next unique feature is going to be the affinity chart. So there's going to be an affinity chart for drivers, which I showed you earlier with Nia, and there's also going to be that same affinity chart for the different blades. So every blade is going to have an affinity chart. And then I think when it comes to unique features, the last big selling point to me is going to be the scale of the world and the exploration. Now, I don't know that I would call this like a fully open world game, but this is about as close as you get without getting that specific label. And it's just ridiculous how big the worlds are and how fun exploration is. All of the terrains are beautiful, and on the Switch too, it just looks immaculate. Like, I just love the way that all of the different worlds that you visit are designed, especially when you put it in like the grand scheme of things that they're on the back of a Titan. I mean, that's obviously a signature of the Xenoblade Chronicles franchise, but the fact that there are so many different Titans with Xenoblade Chronicles 2, as opposed to just 2 from the Xenoblade Chronicles 1, they really stepped it up here, and I think that this is another big selling point. Now for a quick TLDR, I'm going to preface all of this by saying that Xenoblade Chronicles 1 to me is personally one of my favorite JRPGs of all time. But when it comes to Xenoblade 2, I feel like this is a game carried by some of the best combat I've ever seen in a JRPG. This is the first game I've ever considered a New Game Plus for, solely to continue trying out the combat against stronger bosses in the post game with different builds and teams. I've been vocal that the part that I enjoy the most about a JRPG is the story, which I felt was a little too predictable here. Majority of the criticisms are valid though, like the tutorials and the map suck, the blade system could have had better rates, and the story is a little bit above average at best, but despite that, I enjoyed the combat so much that I'd still recommend giving this game a try in 2025. Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and 2 you can play in whichever order you want, but I'd recommend playing both of them before going into Xenoblade Chronicles 3, and I haven't played Xenoblade Chronicles 3 yet. So I'm open to the idea of that tying everything together and changing my opinion on the story, but this is my take now, and I'll revisit this once I beat the next game and do is Xenoblade Chronicles 3 worth it in 2025. Let me know your thoughts though on Xenoblade Chronicles 2 in the comments down below. If you're looking for more JRPG content like this, check out this video right here where I explain why Xenoblade Chronicles 1 is such a legendary JRPG. Thank you for your time, and I'll catch you in the next one.